In this video, I want to talk to you about debanking, right? Debanking is when banks ban you, and we've seen this impact many people like Kanye West, and we're going to talk through it in a bit of context here. We're going to start with a clip from Mark Andreessen when he was on an interview with Joe Rogan, and he's been a vocal advocate for crypto blockchain technology. He has a research company called A16Z. He's very popular in the crypto space, right? He's launched dedicated crypto funds that are worth billions of dollars, invested in blockchain startups, DeFi, decentralized finance, and Web3 innovations. This is quite an important personality. He has, you can see for this clip, it has about 60 million views on Twitter or X, which Elon Musk has posted here. So let's listen to a bit of his opinion on this particular dynamic.
In financial services.
Can you give me an example?
Debanking. This is where a lot of the debanking comes from, is these agencies. So debanking is when you as either a person or your company are literally kicked out of the banking system.
Like they did to Kanye?
Like they did to Kanye. My father has been debanked.
Really?
We had an employee who...
For what?
For having wrong politics. for saying unacceptable things. Under current banking regulations, here's a great thing. Under current banking regulations, after all the reforms of the last 20 years, there's now a category called a politically exposed person. And if you are a PEP, you are required by financial regulators to kick them off of to kick them out of your bank.
What?
You're not allowed to have them.
What if you're politically on the left?
Well, that's fine.
No.
because they're politically exposed.
So no one on the left gets debanked?
I have not heard of a single instance of anybody on the left getting debanked.
Can you tell me what the person that you know did? What they got them debanked?
Oh, well, I mean, David Horowitz is a right wing. He's pro-Trump. I mean, he said all kinds of things. He's been very anti-Islamic terrorism. He's been very worried about migration, all these things.
And they debanked him for that.
Yeah, they debanked him. So you get kicked out of your bank account. You get out of you can't do credit card transactions. By the way, you can't.
How is that legal?
Well, exactly. So this is the thing, and then this thing of like, well, this is the government and the companies get intertwined. Back to your fascism point, which is there's an amendment that says the government can't restrict your speech, but there's no constitutional amendment that says the government can't debank you, right? And so if they can't do the one thing, they do the other thing, and then they don't have to debank you. They just have to put pressure on the company banks to do it, and then the private company banks do it because they're expected to. But the government gets to say, we didn't do it. It was the private company that did it. And of course, JP Morgan can decide who they want to have as customers, of course, right? Because they're a private company. And so it's this hand that happens. So it's basically, it's a privatized sanctions regime that lets bureaucrats do to American citizens the same thing that we do to Iran.
Whoa.
Just kick you out of the financial system. And so this has been happening to all the crypto entrepreneurs in the last 4 years. This has been happening to a lot of the fintech entrepreneurs, anybody trying to start any kind of new banking service.
So this egghead genius is someone we should really pay attention to, right? And he's mentioning a good point here around if you have the wrong politics. We see what Kanye West, or Ye, what happened to him when he started expressing certain opinions. JP Morgan kind of removed him. We'll come to that in a bit of context a bit later. And then we also got instances where you would have other crypto entrepreneurs, right? And this is the thing, the banking system is like an oligopoly, right? They don't want competition. So many times, when they're preventing other crypto companies from having some access to TradFi, to traditional banking, they make all these type of boundaries that seem reasonable in terms of regulation and protecting the company from reputational risk and financial risk. But a lot of the time, you just don't want innovative competing with them. So some of these companies now have to register with kind of small niche banks or niche corporations in kind of offshore locations where there might be some tax benefits, but it presents additional layers of bureaucracy for them. And the thing is, he's mentioning here PEPs, which are politically exposed persons, which are a very important thing that comes up in finance and something I've worked in terms of reputational risk management for major companies. So what they'll do is they rank different clients, right, in terms of how much risk they are to the company, to the bank. So some of those risks are typically, if you have links to a major politician, particularly a politician in an underdeveloped nation, maybe you're a friend or the daughter or son of a mid-level politician in Saudi Arabia or in Nigeria, and they might perceive that as being higher risk because it's maybe a government that is associated in the past with a level of corruption, and they might consider you higher risk, and they run these checks on a regular basis through systems like World Check, which is basically running your name and the name of any names you're linked to through this news checking system to check for any negative news. So say if you're the son of a Nigerian finance minister and you're not involved in government whatsoever, but you're father, who's the finance minister in Nigeria, is under investigation for whatever reason due to some government corruption, the bank might decide to get rid of you. And in terms of close your account or tell you to move your funds within 30 days before they close your account because they think you're a reputational risk to the company for money laundering. Now, in some cases, you might think that's reasonable. They need to protect the company. But a lot of these areas are quite grey and they can find any reason to get rid of any client if you have a politically correct opinion. And what sometimes I think about the instance where Kanye West got cancelled, right, for some of his views, which we're not going to go through here. But what it reminds me is where they draw the line. Because you might say, okay, if someone shows support for nationalism, they might be politically incorrect, but based on how some of these banks see it. But if you're a rapper, a music artist, and you're making consistent misogynistic raps, then that's not politically incorrect, and you might be a private banking client of JP Morgan or be a high net worth individual who has a major bank account at some of these corporations, some of these major banks. So it's very, like I say, it's a grey area who they're going to deem as high risk client versus low risk to the company's reputation. And he mentions in this brief clip how if you have left-wing leftist beliefs and these type of liberal views are favoured by major financial institutions, you don't deal with that difficulty when it comes to banking, right? And this is how difficult it can get. There's all sorts of double standards here. And as you can see, banks, they can really attack your free speech, putting pressure, on where the government will say, oh, we have free speech in this country, but behind the scenes, all sort of discussions are being happen that you don't know, where they put pressure on you and your freedom and what you can say. And you never know, certain people who are public figures, they might all of a sudden change their opinion. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes if they're receiving indirect comments verbally that they should change their opinion, or their bank accounts will be shut down, or their ability to invest in a country will become more difficult. And this is how you get unofficially cancelled, right? Banks love to talk about capitalism and competition being good things, but like I say, it's really an oligopoly. They don't want competition to the banking cartel, and the establishment doesn't want competition to their opinions. So let's learn more from his talking points here.
And this is called, so it's Operation Choke Point 1.0 was 15 years ago against the pot and the guns. Choke Point 2.0 is primarily against their political enemies and then to their disfavored tech startups. And it's hit the tech world like we've had like 30 founders debanked in the last 4 years.
Really?
Yeah. It's been a big recurring pattern.
30.
But this is one of the reasons why we ended up supporting Trump. It's like we can't live in a world where somebody starts a company that's a completely legal thing and then they literally like get sanctioned, right, and embargoed by the United States government through a completely unaccountable, no due process. None of this is written down. There's no rules. There's no court. There's no decision process. There's no appeal. Who do you appeal to, right? Like who do you go to get your bank account back, right?
God.
And then there's also the civil asset forfeiture side of it, which is right the other side, and that doesn't happen to us, but that happens to people in a lot of places now who get arrested, and all of a sudden, the state takes their money.
Yes, but that happens to people if they get pulled over and they have a large amount of cash in some states.
Right, or there'll be there been well public there was there'll be an investigation into safe deposit boxes, and the next thing you know the feds have seized all the contents of the safe deposit boxes, and that stuff never gets returned. It's this, and this is this is when Trump says the deep state. The way we would describe it is it's administrative power. It's political power being administered not through legislation, right? So there's no defined law that covers this. It's not through regulation. Right, there's nothing you can't go sue or fix this. It's not through any kind of court judgment. It's just raw power. It's just raw administrative power. It's the government or politicians just deciding that things are going to be a certain way, and then they just apply pressure until they get it.
So what happens to those 30 tech people that you know?
Start to go into a different field, like try to do something different and try to get
complete upending of your life.
Yeah, complete upending of your life, and try to get out of try to get away from the eye of Sauron. Try to get out of whatever zone got you into this and keep applying for new bank accounts at different banks and hope that at some point a bank will say, oh, okay, it's okay. We've checked and it's now all right.
Whoa.
But there's no.
So what do they do with their money? Like what happens?
You go to cash.
You go to cash.
You can't have
so where do you put it?
I don't under your mattress.
That is so insane.
Yeah,
if someone has $30 million in the bank and they get debanked.
Diamonds, art, do you, I don't know, go overseas somewhere?
Holy shit.
Yeah. And just it just happens. And again, important, there's no fingerprints. Like there's no person who.
There's no stick above the strings.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It just happened. And we can trace it.
So this goes on to a second point, right? He's talking about 30 founders in tech that have been debanked. And this is the reason I'm not going to get too much into politics in this video. But, if you're an innovator and an entrepreneur, you're going to most likely lean towards the right and towards Trump, because in order to innovate, you need freedom of thought, freedom of opinion, freedom of speech to be able to start businesses, even if there are new gray areas like innovation in crypto, DeFi, NFTs, things like that, where there might be a gray area in terms of regulation and securities regulation. And then Trump is definitely more pro-business than the other side. But what you understand is the system, the people that really run this system, the economic forums of the world, they're really socialist institutions. They don't want competition, like I say, in terms of opinions, in terms of innovation, unless it's coming from an oligopoly and all these deep state-backed assets, allegedly, like an Amazon, a Google, a Facebook, major banks. They don't want any innovation unless they can buy it up quickly and take over it, right? And this is what happens when lots of things we can't really track, right? Not just banks banning you, but also the algorithm shadow banning certain accounts, like people on Twitter or YouTube or even Instagram. They might say their accounts are shadow banned. All of a sudden their engagement's gone down because they have certain opinions that the system isn't pro. It's very hard to track these things. And something he mentioned about people having money or resources or expensive items in safe deposit boxes, and if the feds or any of these authorities are investigating you, even if you have a safe deposit box, which some banks offer, maybe you store some gold there, if that you're being investigated, those things go missing, is kind of, you've got nowhere to go, especially if the major governments think you have a politically incorrect opinion, maybe a socialist leftist government, and you're getting screwed over. No one's really got your back. You can't even trust the so-called legitimate government and judicial system, right? So this is the thing, right? When the system can pick and choose who they don't like, who they can ban from banking and even having an account, they can ruin your life, right? And there's all sorts of red flags that might be listed against your name behind the scenes, and then you're blackballed from a certain industry because maybe the Secret Service has some kind of tracking of your internet for having politically incorrect conservative opinions or conspiracy theory websites, and all of a sudden you're red flagged and it comes up when they do background checks on you for certain major corporations. You never know what's going on behind the scenes, and this is the type of crazy dystopian we see here, right? Not only impacting crypto innovators, Kanye West, independent media that constantly have to struggle just to have the basics like a bank account. And ideally, if Trump or other good governments want to be in place, they should allow people to have their opinions and have some kind of legal right that a bank can't just ban you due to some kind of ridiculous reason, like you having a different political opinion, and they try to frame it like you're a high risk client for whatever reason.
Of this, your specific instance of it, like you can't trace it back, and there's nothing.
What are the instances? Like, what is the company? What are they trying to do, and how do they run afoul?
Well, all the crypto startups in the last basically 4 years. So remember the crypto thing got like really, sort of everybody got excited and like NFTs and like all that stuff, and then it just like stopped.
Yeah.
And the reason it stopped is because basically every crypto founder, every crypto startup, they either got debanked personally and forced out of the industry, or their company got debanked and so it couldn't keep operating, or they got prosecuted, charged, or they got threatened with being charged. This is a fun little twist. So the SEC sort of has been trying to kill the crypto industry under Biden, and this has been a big issue for us because we're the biggest crypto startup investor. The SEC can investigate you, they can subpoena you, they can prosecute you, they can do all these things, but they don't have to do any of those things to really damage you. All they have to do is they issue what's called a Wells notice, and the Wells notice is a notification that you may be charged at some point in the future. Like you're like on notice that you might be doing something wrong, and they might be coming after you at some point in the future.
Oh my God.
Okay, so
terrifying. That's the eye.
The eye of Sauron is on you. Okay.
Yeah.
Now trying to be a company with a Wells notice doing business with anybody else.
Oh my God.
Right. Try to work with a big company, try to get access to a bank, try to do anything.
So that's when they support DEI initiatives and
Well, and then the SEC under Biden became exactly. So DEI, they did a lot with that, and then ESG, all the ESG stuff. And ESG is a very malleable concept, and they piled all kinds of new requirements into that. So through this process, the SEC could basically just simply dictate what companies do with no accountability at all. Like there are hearings were held at, but like nothing changed. Nothing ever happened in a hearing that ever changed anything. It's just the raw application of power.
Crypto startups were attacked when you mentioned NFTs, people getting debanked personally. This is one thing to own a company and then maybe the government has a legal financial grey area around regulation of NFTs, for example, then they might want to shut down your company or cease operations so you can move it to a foreign jurisdiction where you can operate it there. But the fact that they would debank you personally as an innovator, as a CEO, because they see you personally as a threat, that just shows you how rigged the system really is, right? With the major banks, same way with the major tech firms. And the thing is, if you don't play ball with them, they'll try to screw you over because they'll see you as competition, right? So that's really important to mention. And when it comes to DEI and ESG, right, a lot of this nonsense in terms of dictating what companies do, again, it's another sign that things are rigged. Companies like BlackRock, Larry Fink, major, governmental organizations where I thought America was meant to be the most capitalist country and giving innovation and competition, but all of a sudden you can see how they were deliberately wanting to use DEI and ESG to dictate to companies how they should operate. It wasn't simply about innovation or being more careful about the environment and taking care of the climate. It really was about, again, re-entrenching through overburdensome regulation this type of tightly controlled elite. Now, a lot of people are being linked, a lot of people who are linked to crypto and innovation, I'm sure they're being monitored and tracked, at a powerful level in terms of what they're doing, what they're saying, what power leverage they have, right? And I've seen similar things in the finance industry, so it's quite common. Now, we're going to go through some examples of different people who've been debanked, how it's impacted them, and how it can really limit free speech, and something to bear in mind in terms of how you determine being self-sufficient from the system, maintaining your assets, whether it's in crypto, in hard wallets, physical gold bars, having multiple passports, multiple properties across the world, however you choose to live, even living off the grid to a certain extent. So you're not dependent on banks that could ban you because you have a different opinion or you have a different alternative lifestyle, or even if you have different media sources that you listen to. So now we're going to go through some cases, right, where people have been debanked. In this case, we've got Henrik Palmgren. Henrik Palmgren essentially was a independent media content creator, right? He had a channel called Red Ice TV. It was on YouTube, and I think it got banned. Then they moved to other channels. They other websites like Rumble and things like that. They weren't saying anything particularly controversial. I'd seen some of their shows. They're very pro-European. You might say pro-white, but they weren't like all about hating different demographics and things like that. So what he says here is that him and his wife and his company, Red Ice TV, were debanked by Wells Fargo. And in 2019, for having the wrong opinions and saying the wrong things, their business, credit and personal accounts were closed. They've not been able to get a credit card processor since that. And also they've had a lot of pressure on them from groups like, as you can see there, which type of demographic has a lot of control over free speech. Starts with A, starts with S, there you go. They need to be stopped, and there needs to be legal protection in place, especially if someone like Epstein or Diddy don't lose their bank accounts. And that really does make you think, who really runs the system? What type of activity are they comfortable with, given Epstein was quite closely linked to major banks like JP Morgan and things like that. He had billions of dollars, or at least millions of dollars, or billions of dollars, however much that would be. And he also had links to actually working in the finance industry or working close with banking professionals. So when you compare that with someone who just has a politically incorrect opinion, maybe they think that the countries in Europe should have less migration, and then they get completely banned from banking, but then someone's doing something inappropriate with kids and they're okay to have a bank account. Well, how does that work? Next, we've got that famous case where JP Morgan has shut down the banking relationship with Yeezy, or Kanye West's company, his clothing company, and they want him to move to another financial institution. I think they give him like 1 month, or it's typically 30 to 90 days that they want you to leave due to having different opinions. They don't word it like that, but the whole point is that if this system or these powerful entities, powerful groups, Early Life Check, Hollywood, people who run those type of industries, they want to get rid of you, they'll basically use all these underhand tactics because they'll have their network behind the scenes, the elite, the establishment, secret societies, however you want to label them, right? Now, I remember looking at this and being quite closely keeping up with this particular scenario when it came to Kanye West. And I remember him having this clip where he's just invites a local reporter just to spend some time with him while he's working on his clothing line. This is before he was cancelled, before he left LA and kind of shut down his business operations. Then he moved to Italy. Now he lives in Japan and just makes music and lives a quiet life, which is kind of good for him. If you think about it, he got out of Dodge before the whole investigation into Diddy and Jay-Z and and people like that who may have done something controversial. I mean, I don't know everything Kanye West has done behind the scenes, but based on how he speaks, he's clearly not necessarily fully on board with how this elite or this establishment operates, and that's why he kind of got cancelled for having opinions that don't go along with that. I get the impression that he was in their good books, something happened, he didn't see eye to eye with them, he felt like they were exploiting him after a point of cooperating with them for many years, because that's how you get your foot in the door, particularly when it comes to the fashion industry or particular heights in the music industry. All of a sudden then he has different opinions, business issues with them, and then he gets cancelled. And it reminds me of stories that he's told, and you hear about people like Michael Jackson, right? Because when you're in a powerful position, at least from a public perception, and you can influence people, these systems, the powers that be, they have everyone trying to control you. You know, you think you're an independent entity, but the accountant and the lawyer and the business manager and your entertainment manager, your agent, they're all connected, and they all can conspire to work against an artist, right, and manipulate you. And we've seen in many cases like that. There's so many cases of celebrities ending their life through overdose and things like that. Very suspicious circumstances. It's good he got out of Dodge before that happened. So here we're going to learn about how these type of unfair business practices can occur.
The reason why I'm announcing that I'm running for president is I want the FCC to look at my money. If the FCC was looking at my money, there had been a possibility that Adidas wouldn't have went into JP Morgan and froze my account and put a $75 million hold on 4 different accounts. I went from being a multi-billionaire to not being able to use my Apple Pay. 4 nights ago, I couldn't use my Apple Pay because somehow Adidas was able to legally go in and freeze my money. And when I see this, I think, well, if this could happen to me, this could happen to other Americans. And for what? You know, this can happen to an American that didn't even steal anything, that didn't even hurt anyone. This could just happen to you for saying the wrong idea out loud, for expressing yourself, for expressing frustration. How many of you guys have been at a job and you were frustrated with a manager or a situation and you didn't want to say anything because you didn't want to go back to your dad? You might be taking care of your dad. You know what I'm saying? He might be elderly. And this person at your job can treat you a certain way because you're not going to lose that position because you know you got to take care of your dad. So you deal with a lot of things. You know, you saw what Adidas is trying to do. They showed you the reason why I put in the termination notice to Adidas originally a couple months back is they were trying to steal my company from me and steal my designs. They hired my lawyer. They paid the lawyer, Equan Rowe. They paid this lawyer to sign off my IP, North St. Chicago Psalms IP, to Adidas. This is a major company doing this to a major person in front of everyone. So what happens behind closed doors? If that can happen to Ye, what can happen to you, to your grandparents, to your parents, to your children, to your cousin, your nieces, your nephews?
So that's just a brief clip of the type of underhanded business tactics that can occur when it comes to business accounts getting shut down, Adidas using underhanded practices, you know, him not being able to use Apple Pay. His Apple Pay was blocked after he made certain comments about that community we're not allowed to talk about or criticize, and for having the wrong opinion, essentially, right? And the thing is, like he said, he hasn't committed a crime. Having a wrong opinion, wrong think, wrong speak is now like a crime, like it's 1984. George Orwell talked about that in that book about you're not allowed to have certain opinions in this society, right? Now, and the thing is, one thing I remember is this occurred around 2021, 2022, right? Let's just say 2022. Now, I remember in 2020, all in the office, everyone, particularly AWFL, affluent white female liberals, who wanted to get the leverage of having the right opinion, they would go all out supporting BLM, right? Black Lives Matter. They would have these emails on the team kind of email trail, these groveling emails. These white women would type, oh, I'm really against white privilege and white fragility, and I'm going to the lecture that is coming to our banking institution, which I won't name now, who's going to give us a lecture about racial equality. they got so much leverage and so much money was made in just a couple of years, and so much good social capital was earned by people supporting those opinions. But here on this case, you have a black American who's being debanked, losing his bank account, his business is being destroyed. And effectively, you know, he also had other videos out there where he didn't have access to visit his children during the divorce with Kim Kardashian. And the whole point is, where were the panderers then? Where were all these race grifters to say, let's support Kanye West? Why is his bank account being shut down? Why can't he open his and keep his fashion business running, his clothing business? Why can't he see his kids? Where are all the people to support him then? Do you get what I'm saying? So it really does make you think about how this system works and how people, all these movements, political social justice movements, they're very manufactured. And then we have the case of the GOAT Alex Jones, InfoWars and things like that. Not saying we have to agree with all his opinions, so hopefully no one's getting upset out there, but it shows how, you know, what was going on in terms of him having his bank's account shut down, right? He had to close his free speech systems bank accounts linked to InfoWars, which is his media site, due to unauthorized transactions and lack of response to prior communications. There's all these type of things that can occur, right? He had a sudden account closure, and he had to take his balance quite quickly from $2 million to zero. They had the bank said that apparently there was unauthorized transactions. Again, there's all types of gray areas that banks can use to get rid of your bank account. And then it obviously creates a lot of issues if you're running a business. It's not just a personal individual who can move from one bank to another bank, because the other bank might ban them, but at least that's an option. If you have a company, you have a cost coming in and out every day. You have money coming in, money going out, salary to pay. He has a studio, you have to pay many employees, you have to pay for, you know, the electricity, the heating, all those type of basic costs, right? But then if your bank account shut down and impacts everything, right? Then all of a sudden your electric bill's late. You might have to pay extra for that, for a late pay, you know. And then they had temporary reopening of his bank accounts for about 30 days because he has strong lawyers. And this is what it takes. You know, you have to have $1 million lawyers on the payroll just to get basic things like having a company bank account when you have a controversial opinion. And then, of course, you have all these financial pressures with the whole Sandy Hook situation and them suing him for like billions of dollars, which is completely ridiculous. And again, you know, I'm sure a lot of the behind the scenes, there's a lot of political players who are paying for the opposite side of Nick Fuentes, the opposite side of Alex Jones, the same thing with Brett Kavanaugh when he was running for Supreme Court and a woman tried to cancel him. I'm sure there's all these like power players, NGOs, George Soros types who are paying to kind of destroy people's lives, and you don't see who's paying the legal fees of the opposing side to destroy Alex Jones. And then we've got a last little example here, which is Nick Farage, right? And this was kind of one of the first cases notable in the UK of debanking, because typically these things you hear about in the US. So Nigel Farage, if you're not aware, he's a kind of right-wing leaning politician, a bit like a Trump. You could maybe compare him to that. He was very important in pushing for Brexit. Brexit was Britain leaving the EU. He was one of those politicians. There's many funny compilations of him in the European Parliament kind of being very critical of them and mocking them through because he used to be a member of Parliament, a member of the kind of government in Europe, in Brussels, and he would basically be heckling them and kind of pointing out how flawed and how it's a centralized globalist kind of institution. So, you know, he was basically always being targeted for media smears. His finance accounts are being audited all the time. There was one time where there was a suspicious plane crash. I remember that. And then other cases where people have thrown water at him or thrown a milkshake at him. There's been 2 or 3 instances of that. And that could have been, of course, another liquid that could have been very bad for him, right? So the whole point is these systems are kind of debanking people, limiting their free speech, scaring them and scaring other people. When you see someone like this, he's quite rich, right? He's definitely a multimillionaire, right? We don't have this exact amount, money, but I would estimate he was in the 10 million or above range, given he worked in the finance industry. He's quite well connected with stockbrokers and things like that. And I'm sure he's got lots of property and things similar to that. So what ended up happening is NatWest, which is kind of an everyday bank account you'd have, most people have NatWest accounts or something similar. He essentially said that they closed his bank account because they said it was commercially unviable. He had a big account with them, he wasn't using it too much, and they just thought that they didn't want to keep maintaining that. Now, of course, it's such a grey area why a bank wants to shut down your account, because they're a private institution, like we saw at the start of the video. So they can just say, oh, we don't like, oh, they won't say we don't like you, they'll just say, oh, we just don't have capacity to support your account. We have other clients that we need to prioritize. Because there's a private company, they can just come up with any reason, or they can just label you high risk because you have a different opinion. So they said that it was a loss-making account and it wasn't generating enough profit to maintain him as a client. But then there was an independent review done, right? Again, you need a lot of legal pressure for this thing to occur. So essentially they did the review, and then they found that some of the internal discussions weren't really about, whether it was profitable or not. It was about whether you had a politically correct opinion or not. Internally, there were discussions that their co-workers in the company NatWest didn't like his political opinions, and they say it was more about reputation, about whether they wanted to be linked with a politician who has opinions that aren't leftist enough, essentially. So this is what I mean, how they can really target you in that type of way. And then we also have, and this shows the collusion, we mentioned earlier, collusion between government and banking institutions, but now we're going to talk about the collusion between banking institutions and the media. In this particular review, they found out that the CEO of NatWest, this banking corporation, they were discussing his personal accounts with a BBC journalist, breaching confidentiality, breaching data protection laws. So this is what I mean. This whole institution is a rigged game. It's a big club and you're not in it, if you want to quote George Carlin. There's this elite establishment, and this isn't even the biggest bank or like the most powerful bank. But it shows you how, if you're not a leftist, you're not a liberal, you're not a feminist, you're not woke, however you want to describe it, there is a very covert network, and it's just old friend. It could be just friends. It could be, and I typically seen it in the industry as kind of middle class or slightly upper middle class, white liberals, white feminists, things like that. And they're in cahoots with the kind of establishment, however you want to describe them, type of men like Emmanuel Macron and Justin Trudeau. It's that type of personality type from the men's perspective. Then you've got women who are like Sana Marin, Jacinda Ardern. Those type of people, there's a certain personality type that are typically in positions of power, and they're just friends. They've probably got a broad friends network beyond just working. They probably go to the same dinner parties and brunches, and all of them know each other, and they have loose connections between who works in the finance industry, who works in the government, things like that. Again, and then we have these media narratives that were kind of saying that, oh, it was a legitimate business decision to close his bank account, nothing to do with political opinions. But then once the financial regulator reviewed it, and again, like, you got to push and push and push, and most people don't have the resources to do it. If you're someone like at the start of the video who are a crypto entrepreneur, do you want to waste millions of dollars trying to keep your bank account open when you can maybe try another bank account, try to find a bank at a smaller kind of offshore, smaller country? You're probably not. But in this case, when a financial regulator did review it, they found that it was poor governance, inadequate complaint handling, flawed account procedures, all these type of issues. And this goes to show, whether you're Fuentes, Farage, Alex Jones, Kanye West, or Ye, and then you've got Mark Andreessen at the start, crypto entrepreneurs, this banking system really is rigged. It really is a rigged oligopoly. And how do you deal with that? Firstly, you can be careful what opinions you share publicly. If you're going to set up your own type of company, I think initially, depending on what it is, you can set it up in your own country, whether it's the US, UK, or whichever. But I always recommend you try to do research, try to plan ahead. Like, for example, if you know the tax rate's high in your country, think about it down the line. Like, okay, cool, well, I'm going to set up my business in the UK, for example, and then I know there's other low tax jurisdictions that can kind of help me when I wanted to maybe make more money and give less money to the tax man. And also maybe you want to have different opinions that the current country you're in might not be favorable to. Now, I know that's easier said than done. You can do that at a larger scale when you're making a lot of money in your company. But even at a smaller scale, if you're someone, let's just say, for example, I'm ethnically Indian, for example, and if you have connections to other countries, maybe you think, okay, maybe let me set up a bank account in India, right? Or if you're from Nigeria, maybe in Nigeria, and just kind of diversify your portfolio of where your money is, not just crypto and physical gold, but also different bank accounts in different countries. being able to live in different countries. These are all important kind of pursuits you should have rather than pointless social status pursuits of buying a big house for the sake of it. Now, that's something I'd recommend everyone consider. I think we've got a ton of good examples here. And I think if you are looking for some finance expertise in your career, in your personal finances, trying to navigate this crazy world that we see, this dystopian type of environment. I've worked in some of these institutions. I know how they work. I know how this type of very insidious type of octopus, squid, poisonous squid, however you want to call it, of power structure, the elite are trying to really suffocate humanity. So if you're looking for career advice, looking for some genuine advice in this crazy world, let me know, link in description. I'll be happy to speak with you. And what are your thoughts of debanking? Because I'm sure a lot of this will become more normalized as the years go on. And then people are going to be skipping between one bank and the other. Or you're going to have instances where, the government has to institute some sort of strict laws to prevent this level of exploitation of people's free speech. So we'll see how things proceed. Thanks for listening. Link in description if you want to speak with me later. And 2 recommended videos on the screen right now.